In today's video, we're diving into two of the most horrifying cave tragedies ever recorded. In the first, a caver runs out of rope, still 40 feet above the ground, trapped on a slick wall with no way up and no way down. In the second, a team crawls through a 600-foot freezing claustrophobic tunnel, only to find something waiting that they never expected. As always, viewer discretion is always advised. On August 14, 1999, four highly competent cavers arrived. This wasn't a leisurely weekend trip. They were conducting an official inspection. Their objective, to evaluate the pit's viability for a future training ground. They were assessing the location for potential cave rescue practice. The four men, Rodney Mulder, Doug Zetas, Wesley Gurney, and Brent Hobbs, weren't amateurs. They were the people others called when a routine dive or climb turned into a catastrophe. Their mission was strictly procedural. They would rig the rope system, Doug Zetas would make the initial descent to check the dimensions, and he would return to the surface with a detailed report. Zetas was the man for the job, methodical, steady, and practiced in countless reconnaissance missions. The team worked meticulously at the top edge of the pit, securing anchors, setting up pulleys, and confirming the safety checklist. Everything looked exactly as it should. There were no immediate red flags, no unforeseen variables. Zetas began his descent, letting the rope run smoothly through his primary gear. He plunged into the total darkness, relying solely on the tiny beam of his headlamp. The descent was perfect, exactly according to their estimates, until the rope ran out. He hit the stopper knot, the final termination point of their carefully measured system. Zetas found himself dangling in an immense void, completely detached from the rock face. He was still 40 feet, 12 meters, above the floor of the pit. 40 feet is an impossible distance in that environment. Too far to drop safely, too far to simply climb back up using friction alone. He was stationary, suspended, the most dangerous position a caver can find themselves in. Zetas reacted instantly. The protocol was clear. Switch to the ascenders. These specialized devices are the vertical climber's life insurance. They are designed to slide upward easily, but bite hard, locking onto the rope when weight is applied downwards, allowing the user to climb a vertical line. But as Zetas attached his ascenders and tried to shift his weight, the mechanical teeth refused to engage. The mechanism slipped immediately down the rope. This was not a normal equipment failure. This was unique to the pit itself. As he descended, the rope had acted like a giant brush, dragging through a layer of thick, cold clay that covered the subterranean pit walls. The entire length of the line was now coated in a treacherous, slick layer of mud. The mud had clogged the ascender's delicate metal teeth, rendering them useless. There was no purchase, no grip, just a slick, clay-covered rope that offered zero friction. The cold, slimy mud wasn't just clogging the equipment, it was physically covering Zetas from helmet to boot. It had soaked through his clothes and was now aggressively cooling his body. Hanging motionless, covered in wet mud, became a direct attack on his core temperature. Hypothermia was no longer a future risk, it was an imminent threat. He tried desperately to scrape the thick clay from the mechanisms with his fingers, but working fine motor skills with chilled, mud-packed hands in absolute darkness while hanging in midair proved near impossible. Every attempt to clear the gear resulted in another unnerving slip. The psychological weight of the moment was enormous. Zetas, an accomplished trainer in technical rescue, was now paralyzed by an environmental factor. He was facing the very real possibility of dying alone in the pit he was supposed to be surveying. With no other alternative, he performed the one action left. He called to his team above. He shouted his predicament up the shaft. The rope had failed to reach the bottom, and his ascenders were contaminated with mud, leaving him stranded and freezing. Rodney Mulder, Wesley Gurney, and Brent Hobbs instantly grasped the gravity of the situation. This wasn't a simple snag. Their teammate was in a life-or-death scenario where every passing minute increased the risk of catastrophic failure or severe hypothermia. They needed to execute a cave rescue immediately.
The team raced to rig a mechanical haul system. This required meticulous coordination, utilizing pulleys and anchor points to create the necessary mechanical advantage. They needed to generate enough power to lift a fully grown man, plus all his muddy gear, 40 feet up a vertical pitch. The margin for error was non-existent. Any single failure, a slip knot, a broken anchor, or a coordination mistake, would result in Zetas plummeting to the unseen cave floor. This was a classic high-risk cave diving disaster scenario, without the water. The hull system allowed the three men to combine their force against the extreme dead weight. It was a slow, agonizing process. Pull a few feet, reset the grip, and pull again. All the while, the line was straining and the rope was creaking. The ascent was a brutal test of endurance for everyone involved. The rope itself was a constant hazard. The same cold mud that had defeated Zeta's gear now made the entire system slippery and unreliable. Every second was a critical factor in the race against the cold. Zetas was nearing the point of profound hypothermia, which would lead to disorientation and total physical failure. Inch by agonizing inch, the team hauled their colleague upwards. The straining sound of the rope against the rigging was the only measure of progress in the silent pit. After what felt like an eternity of intense, focused effort, the mud-covered figure of Zetas finally appeared over the lip of the sinkhole. The team quickly pulled him onto the solid ground. Zetas was coated from head to toe in thick, freezing clay. He was nearly unrecognizable. His body was shaking violently, evidence of the dangerously low core temperature he had sustained. They immediately applied heat, providing warm water and emergency supplies to combat the severe hypothermia. He was alive, saved by the quick thinking and training of his team. The outcome of the evaluation was clear. The B&G sinkhole was a non-starter for rescue training. The environment was simply too unpredictable, demonstrating how a common element like mud could disable mission-critical safety gear without warning. Doug Zetas made full recovery from his ordeal, but the mission served as a powerful, permanent lesson. Even for the world's most experienced rescuers, the smallest, unforeseen variable can instantly turn a routine inspection into a nightmare. 40 feet of blackness. That's where Doug Zetas found himself, stranded in a pit he was supposed to be rescuing others from. The mud had turned his life-saving gear into a solid block of clay. This is the moment a routine check became a desperate cave rescue. You have the best gear, the best training, and 3 expert partners on standby. You descend 40 feet, and instantly, you're trapped. What single environmental factor could defeat a whole team of professionals? The only thing colder than the mud soaking his body was the terrifying realization the cave hadn't trapped an amateur explorer. It had trapped an expert, and there was no easy way out. They were the experts. They were the ones who saved others. But 40 feet down a pit in Utah, a simple layer of mud turned an inspection into a fatal trap. Watch how 3 teammates execute a high-stakes manual cave rescue and how they avoided a terrible cave diving disaster when the very equipment designed to save them failed completely.
Monday morning, March 2nd, 2022. 2 young men, 21 and 23, stood at the opening of an illegal entry point in Tennessee. Gabriel and Robbie were seeking the famous, treacherous maze beneath Lookout Mountain, a multi-level, subterranean world stretching for miles. Veterans of this system knew about the infamous bottleneck, a 600-foot, 183-meter passage that few attempted. Gabriel and Robbie brought none of the essentials. No wetsuits, no ropes, no proper emergency packs. Only cheap headlamps, thin cotton clothes, and the invincible, reckless confidence of youth. The mountain swallowed them instantly. The air was cool and heavy, carrying the primal smell of wet earth and ancient minerals. Excitement quickly replaced the morning chill. Gabriel led the way, his steps echoing as the passage widened. Robbie stayed close. They felt like pioneers, charting the unseen. They were fully convinced that their enthusiasm was enough to overcome any technical challenge. Underground, hours are meaningless. They moved by the light beam alone, that tiny reality cutting through the profound darkness. They attempted a navigation method based on instinct, tossing small stones, marking the rock with scratches. It was a casual trail for a casual trip. This elementary reliance on markers in a labyrinth designed to confuse would soon become their biggest mistake. As they traveled further, the complexity increased. Tunnels began to split, some ascending sharply, others dropping into dark pools. The air grew thick and wet. Then the passage violently closed down. The notorious 600-foot crawl had arrived. First, they were forced to their knees. Then they were forced flat onto their bellies. Water was constantly infiltrating from the ceiling, creating a continuous cold stream. Their clothing instantly became saturated. Cotton is the worst possible choice. They started the agonizing wriggle. For 183 meters, they moved like slugs in a tube, their faces inches from slick, wet rock. Their lights bounced erratically off the confining surfaces. The cold water was a thief. It didn't just dampen their clothes, it began actively leaching their core heat with every meter they conquered. Their breathing became jagged, sharp gasps echoing in the closed space. The tunnel felt less like a route and more like a closing vice. The initial thrill was totally consumed by primal panic, but they had no choice but to continue, the idea of turning back through that same distance being just as terrifying as moving forward. When they finally burst out into a larger chamber, their bodies were already performing the full dance of hypothermia. They were shivering violently, uncontrollably. Their wet cotton was now acting like a second layer of ice. Disorientation arrived instantly. Every passage in the new chamber looked identical to the last. Their casually marked trail, stones and scratches, had disappeared, or perhaps their cold-fogged minds couldn't distinguish them anymore. Fear became paralyzing as their power waned. The headlamps, their only lifeline to reality, began to flicker and dim, turning from bright white to a useless, faint yellow glow. They spent subsequent hours in a freezing, exhausted delirium. They grew weaker with every incorrect turn. Their speech became slurred, their movements were heavy and sluggish. They knew the cold was winning. They retreated into the deepest, farthest chamber they could find, huddling together for any residual warmth. They were 2 miles from the surface. They could only wait. While the outside world experienced Tuesday, Gabriel and Robbie remained imprisoned. They grew weaker as the hypothermia tightened its unseen grip. The call finally came late Tuesday evening. Concerned family members contacted the Chattanooga Fire Department. They admitted the grim truth. The young men had attempted an unapproved exploration inside the restricted system beneath Lookout Mountain. The lead of the Cave Rescue Service, a lieutenant with 15 years of experience, immediately took charge. She didn't need a map. She knew this system by heart. Every dangerous choke point, every dead end, every hidden shelter where the lost often retreated. The mountain was a powerful opponent. It had trapped the unprepared before. Her team mobilized instantly. This wasn't a casual recovery, it was an extreme technical extraction. They knew they needed specialized gear just to survive the notorious 600-foot crawl. They loaded thermal blankets, emergency food supplements, and industrial LED light arrays designed to flood entire chambers with light. They needed equipment that would laugh at the obstacles that had broken the explorers. The search launched immediately into the vast multi-level maze. Rescuers knew the classic mistake: hypothermia causes victims to be so confused that they often travel deeper when they believe they are traveling out. The operation faced a critical outside obstacle: the nearby Norfolk Southern Railway lines. Vibrations from heavy freight trains passing over the mountain could instantly destabilize loose rock formations inside the cave, creating a massive hazard for both the lost victims and the rescuers. A rockfall here could turn the rescue into a multiple fatality cave diving disaster scenario. The rescue command immediately coordinated with railway dispatchers to severely limit or halt train traffic during the most critical search phases. Human lives had to take priority over freight schedules. Teams were split, moving methodically through separate sections of the known cave map. They worked through the night, fresh teams rotating in as exhaustion set in. At 3:45 a.m. Wednesday, 36 hours after the explorers went under, the radio crackled. The advanced search team had found them. The voices were echoing from the very edge of the mapped system, nearly 2 miles or 3.2 kilometers from the entrance. Gabriel and Robbie were discovered huddled together in a small chamber. They were awake, but barely. They were severely hypothermic, their clothes still frozen to their skin, their thoughts clouded by confusion and cold. Rescuers moved fast, providing warm, dry garments and high-energy food supplements. The young men were weak, but thankfully mobile enough to walk with assistance. The only route out meant facing the 600-foot crawl again, the same claustrophobic bottleneck that had nearly defeated them when they were fresh.
This time, the rescuers were their guides. They monitored their condition constantly, provided powerful heat packs to fight the chilling effect of the crawl, and gave constant, simple encouragement to keep them moving. The price for this was massive. Norfolk Southern was forced to completely halt all train traffic for several hours, causing extreme, costly delays across the entire interstate freight network. By Wednesday dawn, Gabriel and Robbie emerged into the sunlight they never expected to see again. Paramedics met them, immediately stabilizing their core temperatures with warming blankets and hot drinks. Both young men made a full physical recovery, but their unauthorized, ill-equipped exploration had a final consequence. They faced potential criminal charges for trespassing. The mountain's maze remains off-limits. Its dangers, proven once again, stand as a warning. Experience and the correct equipment are not optional accessories in this world. For the lieutenant and her team, this was simply another successful conclusion, a textbook cave rescue operation.